Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm presenting important milestones in Dr. Hahnemann's life, and I have put some lessons to learn. A few only I found, and we could learn some new things today. So let's start. Ma'am, next slide. Dr. Hahnemann was born on 10th April 1755, and he was born in the electorates of Saxony, one of the most beautiful parts of Germany. And he was the third child of the family. And he was educated at home under the tutelage of his strict father. He acquired an ability for self-developed study because of some conditions. His father only taught him at home, and eventually the local school, noticing his academic excellence, gave him free tuitions. In his brief biography by J.K. Elwood, Hahnemann praises his father for having interested himself in education of his son and is representing the best example of good sound life his father gave him. Without being deeply versed in science, he had the soundest ideas of what may be considered good and worthy, and his father implanted them deeply on his mind. So Hahnemann also said that my father had the healthiest independent conceptions of that which was good and of men who can be called worthy. So this conception was implanted on Hahnemann's mind from the young age. Next slide. The financial circumstances in the parental home were obviously very strained. So father took his son from school prematurely, and therefore further attendance in school was possible only if he became assistant in house of magistrate Miller. So he had to work in the house, and as the magistrate allowed, he would go to school and study. So Master Miller later became the rector of school, and he was teacher in ancient languages also. So Hahnemann said that I had free access to him at all times of the day, and in many respects was given the preference in public to many others. And he said that it was strange that my fellow pupils also loved me, even if I was given the preference in the school. So, and then his father did not wish him to study at all. So he repeatedly took him from the school, and his father wanted him to do some business which was suited to his income. And then Hahnemann left on Easter 1755. In 1755, he left the school, and it was that it was compulsory to give a speech when you leave the school. So while departure, his subject of speech was a study of human hand in which the optimistic teleologic orientation, next slide, of the liberal periodic period, he voiced a laudation with fine sensitiveness to the benevolent creator of this important part of body. And the part of body was the hand. He wrote a speech on this, and this orientation is characteristic of Hahnemann. Moreover, the fine grammar of this speech is amazing. It is not a discussion plainly and honestly translated out of German into Latin. And the purposeful formation of hand is depicted with ever new thoughts. So what we learn from this period of his life, that from his juvenile state, Hahnemann demonstrated extraordinary determination and commitment towards gaining education. His aptitude for learning was never an ending journey. He always believed that anyone who stopped learning was never an ending journey. Uh, Anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80, and anyone who keeps learning stays young. For him, the greatest thing in life was to keep your mind young. So, Dr. Hahnemann, as a child, developed the attitude of rational reason gifted logical thinker from teachings of his father. Prove all things, hold fast what is good. Next. So now he moved in 1755 to Leipzig, and he was 20 years old, and he entered the university with 20 thalers. It was the last money obtained from his parental home. Now he had to provide his own support through lessons in language which he imparted to foreigners and from earnings by translation of foreign and medical works. And the first work translated by him was the writing of Englishman John Stedman, and the book contained four parts of the division of various type of pulse, the menses, the proportionate measurement of degree of heat, and an unhealthy state of the air in consequence to lack of wind. And the big picture here depicts Hahnemann's room in Leipzig. And it is interesting to note that even in beginning of studies, he endeavored to contribute his labor to unite medicine and natural sciences. So after a few years later, he contributed these efforts with great fortune in field of chemistry, and then later in elaboration of his own theory, he gave this strongly back the relation of medical science and natural sciences. Next slide. Then Hahnemann in Leipzig attended only most important lectures and developed himself through extensive reading. Here he secured foundation for his embracing knowledge of medical literature. Since practical instruction in medicine at the time was lacking in many German universities, including Leipzig, so he was compelled to seek elsewhere for his practical instruction. And in meantime, he was carefully saving his money and preparing to go at the end of 2 years to Vienna, where the advantages of medical study were much greater. And the small sum that he had saved was stolen from him, and it is to this that he alludes as a malicious trick in his autobiography. And but it was evident that he forgave and never disclosed the name of guilty parties, and says that repentance demands forgiveness. Next. So then he moved to Vienna as he was not satisfied in Leipzig, and but the knowledge of medicine he was able to obtain in Leipzig was not so extensive. So he, in beginning of 1777, turned towards Vienna, which at that time was most outstanding medical center of instruction in German Empire. And he said in his letters to Thomas Lindsley that during these 9 months, I had for my support only 68 florins and 12 kreuzers. These were the money, the currency name. So to the Hospital of Brothers of Charity in the place, and to great practical genius of Prince's family physician, von Querin, he supported him and called his physician. So from that money, he survived in Vienna as he had very less money. And according to Hahnemann's own reports, he remained in Vienna three-fourths of a year since he had consumed all money, and he saw himself compelled to look out for an income. Next. So now he moved to Hermanstadt, the city where he started his medical practice, and he remained there until spring of 1779. And then he went to Erlangen, where he, after a residence of semester, he took a doctoral examination on August 10th, 1779, and where his subject of thesis was consideration of causes and treatment of spasms, and it is a collection of all possible type of spasms and methods of treatment. Next. Here what we learn is, if we glance back to this picture of life of Hahnemann, the Miegers straitened circumstances at parental home and his position is in the house of Magistrate Müller were hardly adapted for endowing him with a cheerful childhood and youth. It was all struggle. And because of his poverty, he attempted to establish himself through accomplishments. In his ambition, he depended on himself and remained secluded. So he was industrious, conscientious man, which he remained up to 89th year of his life. And this picture depicts, this is a stamp that was released on 6th October 1977 for Samuel Hahnemann on 32nd International Homeopathy Conference in New Delhi. Now, as a young physician, he moved to Dessau in 1781, a town in which Hahnemann said had better facilities of acquiring knowledge. And here in 1782, he met his first wife, Johanna, and they got married on 17th November 1782. And then he moved to Dresden with his increasing large family, and now he became occupied with chemistry and translating, all giving up his medical practice. And his medicinal writings show he was increasingly interested in power of diet and non-interventionist therapies. Uh, and then in 1789, he moved to Leipzig, and by 1790, he abandoned medical practice. As a physician, Hahnemann placed great weight on fresh air, the use of which he sought obtain even at night. Likewise, he sought to adapt movement to the patient, both in regard to nature and degree. He gave special importance to strengthening through hydrotherapy. And as he knew the psychic cause and aggravation of maladies through emotion, care, grief, sorrow, so in the treatment of patient, he always placed great stress upon the psychic influence, upon cheerfulness from pleasant occupation and music. So he devoted a small individual chapter to this subject. He also gave exact prescriptions on diet where the choleric temperament is treated differently than the phlegmatic. And the following remark in regarding to his views on diet are noteworthy. If one permits the patient at a given time to take nothing more than a few kinds of vegetables and water, or nothing except milk or whey in place of all types of food, this signifies more complete alteration of economy of body. Next. So up till his 50 years of life, he was wandering from places to places as he was not satisfied with the medical practice at that time. And since he perceived the questionable character of existing medicine and suffered from the fact that he must treat humanity on its foundation, he withdrew from the practice. But then, in order to obtain support for his family, he was screen share stopped. In order to obtain support for his family, was again driven to take medical practice. So now the origin of simile principle. Now in 1790, in the notation to his translation of Cullen's Materia Medica, as we all know that from here homeopathy arised as he started proving the cinchona bark and all, but it was not so, as the remark of Cullen and the fever reappearing in his Cinchona investigation are consequently not a falling apple for Hahnemann, like it was for Newton, but only a step further along the already outlined path. Like he proved some medicines before also. This was not the first time while translating. And naturally, a step which gave him a glance into the field which had not been so clear before. This was not so clear. This was happening before, that provings and all, but it was not clear that the symptoms which are produced by the substance are also cured by the substance. So in this sense, the famous Cinchona investigation will always hold its significance. Next. So Hahnemann did many trials with a number of remedies, particularly with ipecac, prior to Cinchona investigation in febrile diseases. And even if here he was treating according to simile, and though he may have been already more or less conscious of it, his principle of healing according to exact symptomatology appears to have been conceived in course of reflections. Like this was appeared after the investigation of quinine. He was doing it before also. This is the meaning of the paragraph. And an important step in development of Hahnemann's doctrine is formed by work appearing in 1805. That was the medicine of experience, and which can be considered as brief comprehensive forerunner of his Organon, which later came. So this picture is that picture is Cullen's Materia Medica's first page. And next, this was translation. And now the Organon of Medicine. In 1810, his famous work, Organon of Rational Medicine, came, and whose second edition was called Organon of Medicine. In 1811, he again moved to Leipzig and presented a long detailed paper about use of hellebore. So many people thought that now he'll come against the use of conventional medicine and all, but that was not so. He presented a paper on hellebore. So once accepted at the University of Leipzig, he began to lecture on homeopathy. He started his lecture of Materia Medica, and later he was accepted as a um, professor in that university. And his best pupils were the young medical students. Those became his provers union. So he started proving with those pupils. Next. So in 1813, when typhus was raging in Leipzig after the battle between Prussian forces and army of Napoleon, Hahnemann, using potentized medicine, was able to cure 178 out of 180 typhus cases presented to him, and the allopathic mortality rate was between 20 to 30%. So this was Hahnemann's power, that he started proving, he started using, and he cured 178 cases out of 180. Then he moved to Cothen in June 1821, and here he continued his proving, and in 1828 he published the chronic diseases, where we know that he was curing the patients, and he was again finding that the symptoms were coming back again, and he was behind that. He was behind to find the cause, what is causing these symptoms to come back again. And during this period, he found the mysomes, we called SWARA, syphilis, and psychosis. The chronic diseases describe this. Next. Then in spring of 1830, his first wife died, and in October 1834, he got into a second marriage with Milani de Hervili. She was his patient, and by January next year, they got married and they moved to Paris. Next. So Hahnemann lived his final blissful, happy 8 years of his life at Paris, and he established his medical practice with his young wife there. So Milani never left his side, and she mastered his case books, all the symptoms and most uncertain notes of Materia Medica Pura, and she became a living collection of homeopathy. Then Hahnemann established the smelling remedies and LM potencies as central pillars of his practice in Paris. And in his last years were filled with experiments on dosage, potency, and mode of administration of remedies. And he made the last revision of fifth Organon on February 1842. So here the last picture depicts the case of Hahnemann, the medicinal case of Hahnemann, which is put to for open for public to see in a museum in some place in USA. And these are life and letters of Hahnemann, which he wrote, and Bradford has published it in a book. And before it is the first page of Organon of Medicine. Next. Some of his writings I mentioned. The first is the on the power of small dose of medicine in general and of belladonna in particular, where in 1801, wherein he explained about the result of infinitely small doses of medicine on morbid state. The nearer the disease approaches the acute character, smaller are the doses of medicine, according to Hahnemann. Then Asclepius in Balance in 1805, which questioned the then prevalent medicinal system about lack of progress in science. And here he questioned the practice of medicine that at that time, and this was the paper published. Then Medicine of Experience, as we discussed in 1805, which is considered as forerunner of the Organon. Next. Then this was the paper of on the value of speculative system of medicine, which was the against the usual method of practice which used to prevail at that time. And then his chemical work, that is writings on poisoning on arsenic, are still considered as best writings in toxicology till date. While he was working as chemist, he proved the arsenic poisoning, and that was his best writings, which are till date very famous. And Dr. Hahnemann devoted his time to chemistry and literature, and in 1789 published his treatise on syphilis. And in year 1790, then the spiritual awakening for Dr. Hahnemann was his Culens Materia Medica translation, and which was this episode was analogous to Newton's apple phenomena or Galileo's swinging lamp. And through this sound sense of inductive logic, similia principle was perceived and seed of dynamic therapeutism and homeopathy was conceived. Next. And then while working as a chemist, a use of reaction is represented in a paper which he made known as in 1787 was his wine test, which detected and differentiated lead, which was frequently added as sugar of lead to wine from iron. And this test is used today also. So this was the famous test, and it was published in Krell's journal that time. And next. So Hahnemann, so the Hahnemann as a man, we could say, was he had habit of self-indulgence of pipe smoking, and one Reverend Everest asked him why he smoked, and Hahnemann replied that, "Oh, it's an ideal habit contracted when I had to sit up every other night in order to get bread for my children," because he used to at night write until his fingers got sore, and so he had this habit of pipe smoking. So then his daily work routine was strictly regulated. He used to sit in his sitting room after night walks till 1 a.m. where he used to write. And okay, next. So this was a Hahnemann's cocktail, where in a book I found this, and it was the drink they gave to the drunks that were brought to the hospital. It was a mixture of Nux vomica capsicum and aromatic spirits of ammonia, and 10 drops of tincture of each and a tablespoon of aromatics were given to the patients. Next. So the last illness and the disease, and around 15th of April 1843, he was attacked by bronchial catarrh, and his memorable words from the deathbed were, "God owes me nothing, but I owe much, owe God much." Yeah, all. And he died on 89th of life of his year in Paris. And this is the photo of his epitome, the first picture, and second is monument at Kothan, Hahnemann's monument. Next. So I would like to finish with, before I put to an end to my words, I want to urge the homeopaths that through our energy and determination, we have to enlighten Hahnemannian homeopathy more vigorously than ever before, and his attributes are ought to be imbibed by us today. As in the present era, the scientific knowledge is accepted only when it validates through materialistic or deterministic viewpoint. So we need to update and respond pretentiously to propagate the master's supreme philosophy. Thank you.